Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar of the 2025 Innovation in Motion webinar series. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar focuses on how PennDOT's Transformational Technology Division is advancing Pennsylvania's position in the world of connected vehicle technology, highly automated vehicles, and electric vehicles. My name is Jacqueline Huss with PennDOT's Bureau of Innovations, and I am your moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I want to review a few important housekeeping items. All attendees are muted during this webinar session. If you need closed captioning, please select the closed captioning icon in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. A question-answer period will follow today's presentation. If you have any questions during today's session, please use the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to submit your questions. One professional development hour will be awarded for attending today's webinar. If you would like to receive the PDH credit, please click on the link in the chat box to complete the survey and submit your information. Before we begin, please be advised that this session is being recorded. If you ask a question or comment in the chat box during the session, please note that by doing so, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of your statements recorded as part of this session. I'd like to kick things off with introducing our speakers for today. Our first speaker, Derek Herman, Transformational Technology Chief and PennDOT's Transformational Technology Division, will explain the history and guidelines for highly automated vehicles. Derek will also share information regarding PennSTART, a partnership between PennDOT, the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission, the Regional Industrial Development Corporation, and Carnegie Mellon University. Derek will be joined by Gunnar Rohn, Engineering Specialist and PennDOT's Transformational Technology Division. Gunnar will share information on connected vehicle technology, also referred to as V2X. Gunnar will provide an overview on recent federal Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation, also known as SMART, grant awards. We will also hear from Colton Brown, Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Coordinator and PennDOT's Transformational Technology Division. Colton will provide information on electrical vehicles and PennDOT's efforts as part of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, also known as NEVI. We want to welcome Derek, Gunnar, and Colton, and we thank you all for being with us today. So let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the Innovation in Motion webinar series. My name is Derek Herman, and I am the Chief of the Transformational Technology Division. Today, I'll be discussing our division and a few projects that we have recently worked on. I'll be joined by my two colleagues, Gunnar Rohn and Colton Brown. Our agenda today will cover the division, our highly automated vehicle guidelines, SMART grant awards for projects related to connected vehicle technology, and lastly, an introduction to our NEVI program and progress that we've made on deploying electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Our division sits within a newer bureau within central office called the Strategic Development and Implementation Office. We're within Highway Admin, and our bureau director is Mark Kopko. Our division consists of myself and only 4 others, so we have a small but mighty team working on really exciting topics. Our role in PennDOT is to serve as subject matter experts on all emerging technology related to transportation. We work first to identify and understand new technologies, their risks, their benefits, and who the stakeholders are. We then work to integrate that technology into what we do every day here at PennDOT. Most, if not all of this, have benefits to mobility, and our number one priority always safety. The core business areas for the division consist of automated vehicles, electric vehicles, connected vehicles, personal delivery devices, and PennSTART, which is an exciting project I'll talk a little bit about later. We also support in different areas such as shared mobility, UAS, and specifically advanced air mobility for aviation. I'm going to jump in the first topic that we have for today, which is covering the highly automated vehicle guidelines and a little bit of history of what led to where we are now. Pennsylvania has a long history with automated vehicles, truly dating back to 2007 when a team from Carnegie Mellon participated in the DARPA Challenge. Pittsburgh region has spawned and supported a huge industry around robotics and automation ever since. Pretty much since then, PennDOT has sought to partner with industry and to help grow in this space. In 2011, CMU launched their first AV pilot. In 2014, PennDOT drafted a 2040 vision for connected and automated vehicles. And as you can see, PennDOT subsequently took steps with both leadership standpoint and in collaboration with legislators to develop a program for safe testing of automated vehicles. Now we have operations as well on the road. Through the years, there have been several laws passed in the Commonwealth that are related directly to automated vehicles. To date, we've had three specifically, and I'll jump in and talk about each of those that impact the industry. Act 117 of 2018 was the first automated vehicle legislation in Pennsylvania. This opened up for automated work zone vehicles and platooning operations. It also established the Highly Automated Vehicle Advisory Committee, which is still stood up today and still working with PennDOT to advance the state of AVs and how we go about our operations and testing guidelines. Act 106 of 2020 brought about personal delivery devices. These are essentially little robots that are delivering cargo, things like food or packages from restaurants to a consumer. They mostly run on the sidewalk, but they can run on the shoulder. And you can see a few examples here of companies that are doing this. To date, now, currently, we have two personal delivery device companies that have authorization to operate. One is in State College on the PSU campus, the other is in Philadelphia. Act 130 is the newest and current legislation for highly automated vehicles. The act legalized commercial operations of HAVs, provided provisions for certification, regulations, and safety. Most importantly, for the first time ever, it provided a pathway for authorizing truly driverless operations on our roadways, meaning taking the driver out of things like trucks or robo-taxis. PennDOT is the sole regulatory authority of these HAVs in PA, and the act directed PennDOT to create regulations or guidelines for authorization. It also prohibited municipalities from enacting regulations on HAVs, and this was to ensure uniformity across the state. It also preempted any local legislation that has been passed to date, again, to promote uniformity. As a result of this, our division has developed a guidebook for municipalities and an incident response plan for our first responders. PennDOT has developed guidelines for the AV operations as required by the Act, and I'll discuss these in more detail in the next coming slides. These guidelines have been released in Publication 950, which you can find on our Forms and Pubs website and also our automated vehicle website. The first section of the guidelines covers a process and requirements for info that needs to be shared with PennDOT on the self-certification form, the review process, issuance and modification of a certification. Certificate of compliance, once it is issued, is good in perpetuity unless there are changes great enough that would no longer be materially correct in describing the scope of operations. The self-certification form has many consents and certifications provided by the type of operation. So whether you're doing a driver on board, a remote driver, or a fully driverless operation, there are different things that the company has to tell us that they are able to do. And those all reflect on safety. The safety management plan covers safety elements of the automated driving system, describes its operational design domain, its dynamic driving task, minimal risk condition criteria, and builds the entire safety case framework. The emergency responder procedures are used to help inform our automated vehicle incident response plan, which we then turn into our mobile app and is accessible by state police and other first responders. There are many other sections, and some of these are still a work in progress, such as our interstate agreements. I'd suggest checking out Publication 950. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. It is important to note that Act 130 and all of these guidelines and the self-certification process are only applicable to commercial operations and educational institutions. You'll notice on the left, we have so far certified 6 different companies. Aurora and Stack, as well as Motional and Carnegie Mellon and Mapless AI are all operating in the Pittsburgh area. Drone Robotics currently is operating along Broad Street, running from the NRG station to the Navy Yard in Philadelphia. This is our Navy Yard AV shuttle. As mentioned previously, Publication 950 is where we host the guidelines. Our last update and what finished out our guidelines was adding driverless and remote operations just back at the end of October of last year. We also established a minimum requirement for certification through the guidelines and the approval process for getting your certificate of compliance. We built these into forms, both a PDF form, and we now have an online application. Companies can go in here and they fill out a lot of information about who they are, who is working for them, the vehicles themselves, and what they're capable of. That is sent in for review by our division and an internal AV task force that consists of PennDOT Driver Vehicle Services, PennDOT Highway Admin, PennDOT Policy, as well as legal. One of the requirements of the guidelines and of Act 130 is to provide a visual identifier on each of the automated vehicles. So this is essentially a sticker or some other form of identification that can be put on at least 2 places on the vehicle, whether it's both sides or the back. Below are some images that show where this could go on different types of automated vehicles, whether it's a truck, a shuttle, or a passenger vehicle. All certificate holders must use these, and in consultation with state police, PennDOT has pulled together what this must look like. It essentially shares owner and vehicle information as well as financial responsibility, i.e. insurance. The purpose of the visual identifier is not to tell other drivers that a vehicle is automated or using automation or currently in automated mode. The purpose is to pass along insurance information in the event of an accident or some other issue that happens on the roadway. The idea being that a vehicle could not have a driver present and another driver who is involved in the accident might need a way to contact insurance or the owner of the automated vehicle. Speaking of crashes, we have developed crash reporting requirements for automated vehicles. So this requirement applies to any accidents that result in bodily injury, serious bodily injury, death, or damage to property. There's an initial report that happens within the first 6 hours, and we collect the information there. Mainly, it's just information about which vehicle it was, the company, and just general location of the accident. The follow-up report within 24 hours is much more detailed. We're hoping to understand, was the vehicle operating within its operational design domain, i.e., was it operating in automated mode where it's supposed to be? A description of the damage and a description of the accident itself, trying to understand and establish what happened so we can determine if there was an issue with what has been approved through the certification or something that may need leading to more investigation or understanding from the department about the safety of the vehicle involved. As you can imagine, over the years, we've worked on many policies, plans, and different research documents. You can find all of these on our website, listed down there at the bottom. Currently, we started a update to our original CAV strategic plan. The update started last year, and we're hoping to finish it out this year, and we'll post that again out on our website. This is really taking an update and trying to understand where the industry is going and what PennDOT should and could be doing as we move forward to both support automated vehicles, but ensure that it is done safely. We're also working on a project called PennStart, which is in partnership with the PA Turnpike, RADC, and Carnegie Mellon. The hope is to provide a state-of-the-art high-speed test track that also has proving grounds like a VDA, where we can try out connected and automated vehicles and other emerging technologies, as well as do team training very safely. The hope is to provide a breeding ground for new technologies and a place that we can try things out before it goes out onto the road. We're working now to get into construction later in this fall, hopefully in 2025, with an anticipated opening of 2026 sometime. I'll close out this section with talking about some of the recent and ongoing initiatives that we've worked on related to AVs. Previously, I mentioned the AVIRP, the Incident Response Plan, and our mobile app that is active and out and available now. The HAV Advisory Committee is active and meeting at least 3 times a year still, discussing new and upcoming things related to AVs. The driverless guidelines are all out and released in publication 950. We've put out a guidebook for municipalities for how to handle automated vehicles coming into their municipalities with Act 130 becoming available. Navy Yard Shuttle is a project that is happening and ongoing right now. You can ride it down to the Navy Yard from the NRG station in Philadelphia. We recently completed an automated driving systems demonstration grant. What this is hoping to do and what we worked on was proving that automated vehicles can travel through work zones and the different things that can support them in doing that. Soon we'll be working on a readiness assessment to understand how ready our infrastructure is for AVs and how to support them. And this next year, we'll be procuring a automated truck mounted attenuator. So we'll be taking the person out of the vehicle that is purposely there to be hit in a mobile work zone. Next, I'll turn it over to Gunnar, who will talk to us about our SMART grants.
Thanks, Derek. So now I'm going to talk about V2X technology and some of the smart grants that we just won for this technology. Connected vehicle technology, or V2X technology, refers to the connectivity between vehicles and other devices. On the left side of the screen, you can see what we refer to mostly as the CV2X ecosystem, and on the right side, you see what we refer to as network V2X technology. So on the left side, you can see we have that RSU icon that refers to a roadside unit, which is a CV2X device that runs in the 5.9 gigahertz spectrum, and that allows for connectivity between that roadside device and the vehicle, which we call V2I, or vehicle to infrastructure. Also in the vehicle, we have the OBUs, which are onboard units, which allow for connectivity between the vehicle to vehicle, or V2V, and also V2P, or vehicle to pedestrian or other road user like a cyclist. On the right side, that's where we have the network V2X, where we have that V2N. So that runs on the cellular networks, or it could be on satellite as well. And that's the connectivity between the vehicle and the network. This V2X technology enables applications, and some of those examples are on the right side. So some of those applications could be red light violation warning, curb speed warning, spot weather impact warning. On the vehicle to vehicle side, it could be a forward collision warning, do not pass, or other ones that are safety or mobility related. The Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation Grant Program, or the SMART grant, is designed to deploy advanced smart technologies to enhance transportation efficiency and safety through innovative real-world solutions. It's a two-stage grant. So the first stage, that's where you do your planning and prototyping. And then for stage 2, which you apply for after stage 1, you can then deploy that on a bigger scale. The first stage was awarded for up to $2 million, and then stage 2, I believe, is about $10 to $15 million maximum award. We won 2 different SMART grants in Pennsylvania, which I'll touch on the next couple slides. The first one being our V2X Data Exchange OEM integration project, and the second being the Freight Signal Priority project. The first one was worth about $1.8 million, and it's going to start to integrate our V2X Data Exchange with automotive OEMs. For the V2X Data Exchange Smart Grant project, the challenge that we're trying to solve is that there's a need to get better notifications and warnings to drivers in their vehicle. The solution that we came up with for the grant is to use network V2X technology, to allow for real-time notifications and warnings to be given to drivers in their in-dash systems. On the right side, you can see some of the crash data from the last 5 years. There were over 18,000 run-off-the-road crashes at curves, or almost 10,000 run-off-the-road crashes at ramps, and a variety of others. So these are crashes that could be prevented by using network VDEX technology. When we were putting together our grant application for this project, we took all the crash data from the last 5 years and analyzed it. We did some quick back of the napkin math. We found that about 30% of crashes and fatalities could be avoided by using these higher latency networked VDEX applications. That's excluding all of the low latency, specifically safety applications related to C-V2X. And we think we chose curve speed warning as our first application for the stage 1 of the grant because it's a static message, it's human verified, and it's not going to change until the roadway geometry changes. So this is a good application to start off with and build trust with the industry. Right now, there's kind of a lack of trust between the OEMs and the IOOs, or infrastructure owner operators. They know that the data coming from the IOOs is a little inaccurate at the moment, so they don't want to rely on that for those very low latency safety applications. So with us starting with a very simple message, we can build trust, move on to the next application, build trust there, and then work our way up to those very low latency intersection safety applications. So for curve speed warning, there's already solutions out there for sharp curves. You've got your static advisory curve speed signs, you've got the chevron signs. If there's still problems at the curve, you could enhance it with LED signs, or for really bad curves, you could do dynamic curve speed warning with like the radar and the LED sign. But that's also very expensive to deploy all that infrastructure on the roadside, where this solution that we're proposing is a very scalable solution that could be done all using cloud-based solutions. So let's take a step back and take a quick look at what is the VDEX data exchange. As part of our advanced traffic management system that was built by Swery, there is a data lake that you can see on the top side of the slide. It's going to be a data lake / data fusion engine / VDEX data exchange, and that will take data from our advanced traffic management system and allow us to exchange data with outside third parties. The third parties that we'll be exchanging data with could be research institutions, connected automated vehicle backend systems, or navigation providers like Google Maps or Waze. From the OEMs and the navigation providers, we can be receiving data that can give us real-time operations data that we can use to better operate our TMCs. We can also be sending notifications to the drivers to warn them of hazardous conditions on the roadways. For the research institutions, we could commission studies and section off, say, a corridor that we want to study, send all that data to the research institution, and then they send us back the analysis, all within the VDEX data exchange. So how does this work for our Smart Grant project? Well, in the middle, you can see the VDEX data exchange. That will then send the roadway geometry information to the OEM backend system, the 511 PA backend system, or the third-party apps. And that information then gets forwarded to the end user's device. So once the end user's device has that roadway geometry on the device, as a user is approaching the curve, the device then determines whether or not a message should be shown to the user, depending on how far over that advisory speed that they're going. So if they're approaching the curve and they're going approximately the advisory speed or below it, they won't receive any kind of notification because they're already going a safe speed. So we don't just want to bombard them with unnecessary notifications. But if they're going, say, like 10 miles an hour over the advisory speed, they'll get that notification to slow down and hopefully listen to it. This is an 18-month project that we just started at the beginning of the year. We've got about 6 to 9 months of planning process for the systems engineering process. We've got about 6 to 9 months of development, and then 6 months to write the final evaluation report at the end. Right now we're in month 4. We're wrapping up the concept of operations, about to move on to the system requirements. We should have this project all wrapped up, hopefully by June of 2026, and then the application should be live. The second stage 1 SMART grant that we won is a freight signal priority project. The basic concept here is that as a truck is approaching a signalized intersection, they send their speed, heading, and location to a cloud server. That cloud server then determines if it would be beneficial to give the truck a couple of extra seconds of green time. And if it would be beneficial, it then sends a priority request message to the traffic signal. If there's no other conflicting priority requests, it then grants the truck a couple of extra seconds of green time to get through the light. This is beneficial because truck stop and go traffic causes a lot of extra pollution emissions in communities and causes a lot of extra traffic congestion. I'm sure everyone's been stuck behind trucks in, stop and go traffic at traffic signals, and it just takes them a lot longer to get back up to speed. So again, it causes a lot of congestion there and a lot of air emissions to get the truck back up to speed. For this project, we're looking at deploying at 2 different locations in central Pennsylvania. The first one being the Harrisburg Pike or Miracle Mile in Middlesex near Carlisle. This corridor has over 30% trucks and sometimes exceeding over 37% during weekdays. The second location is Cameron Street in Harrisburg. There's a couple freight depots along this road, so it's over 10% trucks, and there's a large amount of diesel particulate matter, which we're hoping to lower during this project. So with that, I will turn it over to Colton to talk about electric vehicles.
Thank you, Gunnar, and welcome everyone. So I'm going to start with just a few electric vehicle basics as we dive in here. So first, you can see a number of different fuel type vehicles here. We're all pretty familiar with the conventional gasoline or diesel vehicle. Moving to the right, we have hybrid electric vehicle, which adds a small electric battery and regenerative braking, other features like that. For the purposes of our presentation here today, please note that a regular hybrid vehicle, we're not going to consider an electric vehicle because its only external source of fuel is still gasoline. Moving to the right, we have a plug-in electric vehicle, which means that it's very similar to our regular hybrid, but it has a large enough battery pack and capabilities to receive electricity from an external source that it can travel in electric only mode for a number of miles before the battery would be relatively low and switch back to a regular hybrid sort of operation where there's still improved fuel efficiency, but operating on gasoline. So because it can receive electricity and has both fuel options, we do include that as being considered an electric vehicle. On the far right, we have battery electric vehicle, which as we know, only has a battery and electric motor. It's only charged with electricity. That's the only fuel that it uses for propulsion. So that is, of course, also an electric vehicle. A few quick basics on charging of an electric vehicle, as it is very different than we may be used to with fuel and gasoline vehicles. In particular, there's multiple speeds and methods that can be used to charge a vehicle. So first we have level 1 charging, which otherwise referred to as trickle charging. It just means plugging into a regular wall outlet. For most vehicles, this will provide 4 to 5 miles of vehicle range per hour. That does sound very slow and like it would not meet anybody's needs, but because vehicles do spend a large portion of their time parked, if someone has the ability to charge this way at home or at work, it can actually provide a large portion of an electric vehicle's charging needs. It's also very well suited for plug-in hybrids since they have smaller battery packs and do not need to charge up as much. But there's a good percentage of people who have the ability that could install faster charging at home choose to stick with the level 1 charging because it meets what they need it to. That being said, the vast majority of charging for electric vehicles is performed at level 2 charging speeds. Another way to think of this is an electric dryer outlet. So it is a higher voltage, higher amperage than a level 1 charge. It's generally suited to provide somewhere around 20 to 30 miles of vehicle range per hour charged this way. Plug-in hybrids will charge a little bit slower because they're just not designed nor need to charge as fast. But most all electric vehicles can hit in that range. So if someone can charge with a level 2, either at home or at work, it is sufficient to have a full charge, every night or every morning, depending on your charging schedule. And if you have a full charge to start up each day, then that generally meets the vast majority of somebody's driving needs. And that is the predominant way that they would charge that vehicle. Lastly, we have DC fast charging, which, as it sounds, is the really fast way to charge. Most vehicles are designed to be capable of DC fast charging from 10% of their battery to 80% of their battery capacity in about 30 minutes, so long as the charger is capable of providing that level of power. So you'll most commonly see DC fast chargers along roadways where people need a quick stop to get back on the road. And you will also find DC fast charging in towns and communities, particularly areas where there may be a larger portion of people that can't charge at home. But it's well suited for that quick top off to get back on your way. We do have a number of plug types here displayed on the map. The important thing to keep in mind here is that even though there is some differing hardware in terms of whether a vehicle uses the Tesla or otherwise known as NACS connector or a CCS connector, that the software behind the scenes is really becoming consistent. And there's an increasing number of adapters available to different vehicle models. So shortly and already, most people, as long as they bring an adapter with them, can use most any charging station. That continues to increase in availability. And as long as there is an adapter either at the station or that you bring along, most vehicles can use most chargers. It's important to keep in mind that fueling a vehicle with electricity is a paradigm change from how we're used to fueling with gasoline, in that gasoline, the only way to fuel up your vehicle is at a gas station, fixed locations for short periods of time. Whereas with electricity, there's a lot more options in how we charge and where we charge, and that the traditional gas station model will likely be a small portion of total charging. Very important charging need, but a small overall portion. Most charging occurs at home, at work, or at other destinations. Real quick, there's many ways to find these public charging stations available for use. That includes the 511PA website. There's a layer on there you can toggle on that shows this exact map of charging stations, but as a layer on our own website. And there's many other supports out there as well. In Pennsylvania, we've seen an increasing number of electric vehicle registrations over the last few years. March of 2023 is when PennDOT completed a VIN decoding process to have an accurate count of electric vehicles, and we've maintained that VIN decoding moving forward. So as you can see here, we're on track for pretty much an exact doubling of electric vehicle registrations between March of 2023 and March of 2025. As there are about 10.7 million motor vehicle registrations in Pennsylvania, electric vehicles do now comprise over 1% of motor vehicles in Pennsylvania. The resource that we have available is a map showing where these registrations are concentrated throughout Pennsylvania. This map is available at the zip code and the county level. So this is on PennDOT's website. You can zoom in, see how the registrations have changed over time for each zip code in each county. And this is updated quarterly with currently it's displaying end of calendar year 2024 data. So now we're going to dive into the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, otherwise known as NEVI. So this was a $5 billion national program created through the infrastructure law. Pennsylvania's share by formula of that funding is $171.5 million over the course of 5 years. Due to recent federal changes, we do have our first 4 years of this funding appropriated, but we only have permission to proceed and with the funds already obligated, which is essentially the projects we've already awarded. We'll dive into that more here shortly. But it is still, by formula to be PennDOT's funds according to the legislation. So here we can see a map of the alternative fuel corridors in Pennsylvania. It's the way the NEVI program works, the way the law was written. We are first required to build out a network of high power DC fast charging along these roadways before we're allowed to use NEVI funds for public EV charging at any other locations or power levels. So here you can see a little bit more detail on those requirements for building out the network. Every location that we fund has to have a minimum of 4 ports, has to have the CCS connector type, can also have other connectors, but must have a CCS connector for every port. And there has to be a minimum power level of 150 kilowatt from each port simultaneously. These stations have to be located within 1 mile of each highway exit, and no more than 50 miles of travel can be possible between stations while staying on the alternative fuel corridor network for us to reach that full build out requirement. So PennDOT has been an early mover in this program, making lots of progress. We have already completed 3 funding rounds through the NEVI program. With each successive round, we were looking for a smaller number of remaining gaps to be filled with additional projects. So we do have a total of 91 projects that were awarded and remain active. And of those projects, 9 have thus far reached operational status, and that continues to increase over time. Here's a map of those active projects. This map is just a little bit out of date, so there's a few more operational stations that may not be displayed here. Stations in blue are those that are operational. You can always see what the current status is by going to the live version of this map on our website. It gets updated pretty quickly when a station changes from being in design phase to construction phase, or from construction phase to operational. So you can see some photos of our operational stations. The one on the right is our first one that came online. It was also the third live NEVI station in the country. And we're now up to 9 total. You can see those locations listed there. We have our second station in the lower left and our third station in the lower middle of the screen. So as PennDOT has made great progress on the alternative fuel corridor network for NEVI, we're also very prepared and ready to move into the next phase of the NEVI program when we receive that greater flexibility. We're referring to that as our community phase of the NEVI program. And to prepare ourselves and message and receive feedback from the public on this plan, we have already released what we call our framework for how to invest those remaining funds. You can see we have kind of 4 funding categories, and we'll dive into each one in a little bit more detail. So first we have corridor connections. This one looks a lot like the alternative fuel corridor funding rounds, but focused on major roadways that are not interstate highways that we were not able to fund chargers along in the first rounds of the program. So you can see a draft map there of what that funding round could look like, where we'd be looking for projects. Again, really filling out our roadways in other regions of the state that do not have that long distance travel connection currently. Our second funding category is what we call community charging. And this is really where the bulk of our estimated $100 million of remaining NEVI dollars would be invested. So the focus of this is really providing that local charging access where it's needed. So because this is so broad and charging needs vary so much from community to community, PennDOT is really leaning on our planning partners for support throughout the state. So as we speak, our planning partners are engaging with their communities to build 2 deliverables to PennDOT. One is priority use cases. Essentially, what types of charging do local communities most prioritize for their area? So that could be downtown charging, that could be tourist locations, that could be convenience stores, anything. Basically, what is it that they feel is the next highest priority for investment with public resources in building out their local EV charging? And the other is their priority locations. So specifically, what towns, neighborhoods, zip codes, that sort of thing are the highest priority for investment in EV charging in their regions. So each of the planning partners are building that and summarizing it and getting it to PennDOT over the coming months. And PennDOT will then be able to use that information to make priorities in funding opportunities that we will make publicly available for companies and organizations to pursue those funds and projects. So we did apply a relatively basic formula to the state to identify a funding target for each county, which built up into each planning partner region. So you can see here approximately how much funding we would see going to each area. It is the number one variable here is population. That's the main driver of the funding target for each planning region. And we would break the state into a few different regions when we do these funding opportunities. So we're not pursuing projects for the whole state at one time, giving everybody a little bit of time and bandwidth to focus on a regional basis as we move around the state. So here's a summary of the funding levels that we see for each of the 4 topics. The 2 that we didn't discuss in detail, one is critical investments, which is really what other needs arise, what areas maybe were not sufficiently met in their charging needs through the formula of the community charging program, miscellaneous charging projects that are still of good importance, and then EV workforce development. This does have to relate to EV chargers, but basically building the workforce to install and maintain these chargers to ensure they stay operating and in good condition moving forward. Have a number of other notes here on just other EV education activities and feedback that's ongoing. So first, if you're interested in staying up to date on the NEVI program, certainly let us know. We can get you on that email list. PennDOT's also in the process of making an EV educational video series for the general public that will be topical. So for example, battery fires or driving an EV in the winter are both examples of videos that could be through that series. First video could be released in the summer with more videos to come over time. PennDOT's also developed some guidance material for local governments to ensure safe level 1 charging. So basically running an extension cord over public sidewalks. So you can see some introductory information to that in a PennDOT Connects newsletter. And there should be more more guidance on that coming out. And then lastly, we have 2 training resources available from other organizations. One is training for first and second responders focused on EV battery fires, available from GM. And the other is a training program from SAE International for individuals to become trained technicians that service and maintain EV chargers. So I thank you all for your time. Here you can find contact information for both the Connected Automated Vehicle team on the left and the electric vehicle team on the right. And we look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek, Gunnar, and Colton for your presentations and providing an informative look at PennDOT's position in the world of connected vehicle technology, highly automated vehicles, and electric vehicles. Now we'd like to hear from you, our audience members. If you have any questions for our presenters today, please enter it via the chat box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Anya Walker from the Bureau of Innovations will read them. While we are waiting for the questions to come in, please direct your attention to the chat box. If you would like to be awarded 1 PDH credit for your participation today, please click on the link and complete the short survey. Now back to the questions. Panelists, can you please unmute yourselves? Anya, what questions do we have today in the chat?
Yes, thank you, Jacqueline. So we do have a few questions here. I'm going to go back to the beginning. We had a question regarding the sharing the presentation slides. And I think what we're going to do this time, we'll share the slides with all attendees together with the recording of the webinar once it has been posted to YouTube. So stay tuned for that. Then I saw one question in there that I think Derek already answered. I'm still going to, just for everybody's benefit, read it out. So have there been any reported accidents with highly automated vehicles in Pennsylvania? And as Derek mentioned, there have only been 3 total incidents reported in the required federal reporting database, I guess, through NHTSA. And all of those were SAE level 2 vehicles, which we do not consider a highly automated vehicle. I guess that would be level 3 through 5. So in all of those incidents were not the fault of the vehicle, but there were driver errors. So I hope that answers that question. Another question we have in here is if PennDOT has a fleet deployment plan related to incorporating alternative fuels.
Yep, this is Colton here. I guess a quick answer there is that Executive Order 2019-1 has a requirement that the state fleet reach 25% electric vehicles by the end of 2025. That only applies to light duty passenger vehicles, would exclude pickup trucks. The PennDOT would be included in that and is working towards meeting the goal of having that level of vehicles, plug-in hybrids and all electrics count towards it. I think that would be the extent of what we would have for a deployment plan, though.
Okay, and then as a follow-up to that, I'm not sure if there have been any discussions maybe with DGS regarding allowing employees to charge at work and to implement charging stations at work.
Yeah, simple answer here is it's complicated. We do have discussions behind the scenes. We've been trying to tackle it for a while, getting to a place where we could have public and or employee charging at Commonwealth facilities, not just PennDOT. At this point, the only agency that has public charging is DCNR at the state parks, and they are free. It gets complicated when the charging is for employees or when it's for the public and you're charging a fee. So it's a space that we're trying to get into, but just complications lining up with state laws and things like that. So hopefully more to come in the future.
Understood. Thank you. Right, a couple more for you, I think, Colton. Is there thinking or advancement of energy infrastructure to compensate for addition of EVs and processing power from the cloud-based automated vehicles and keeping the energy sources green? Maybe that's more for Derek. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we could all sort of take somewhat of a stab at this, but I think the first thing I'll say is, one, we don't really expect AVs to require a lot more power. Pretty much everything that's happening computing-wise is happening on board the vehicle. What we're doing with connected vehicles is really happening on existing mobile networks, so that already exists, and the bandwidth need isn't really that great at this point. If we do get into roadside units and much more complicated, higher bandwidth needs, we'll certainly need to build out things like our fiber network better. But we do have a lot of IT issues facing that we have to get through, such as like a general use network that currently basically just does not exist. So really, power needs are less of a thing. I think if we're talking about electric vehicles and adoption there's a lot of planning happening out at the the different utilities. There's different ways that they're tackling things like this. So one example would be, um, someone could buy an EV and start to plug it in their house, and a utility would never actually know about it. So some of them are actually incentivizing, trying to understand where EV charging is happening by giving rebates for things like a charger in your garage. But further, they also have been tracking and have a lot of time to plan for the EV adoption. So it's certainly something on the mind of utilities. I would say PennDOT plays a lesser role in that, but it's something we have engaged them on.
All right. Thank you, Derek. All right. Has federal funding been discontinued for EV charging stations that have not yet been bid?
Yeah, so getting at in the presentation, I mentioned how obligated projects can move forward, and there's kind of a hold on the rest of the NEVI program. So essentially, the big picture is that the federal government wants the states to kind of update their plans for how they're going to use NEVI funds, so they ensure that it aligns with the new administration's priorities, and then they'll reopen that ability to obligate new funds. So it's not discontinued. They don't have a way to take those funds and use them for anything else, absent new legislation. So it's really just a hold for the time being on starting new projects.
Okay, and then another question regarding the obligation of funds. Are the estimated 75 to 80 million in community charging funds considered obligated?
No, only the funds for our about 90 active projects are obligated.
Thank you. Continuing, what is the availability for municipalities purchasing EVs through the co-stars or other purchasing programs?
So I know that the co-stars contract that municipalities can use for purchasing fleet vehicles does have a number of EV models. It varies by year. I'm not up to date on what that exact list is right now. I think it can be found online. So that is definitely an option, though, that can help municipalities. It's just subject to which models they can get on the contract for that given year.
Thank you, Colton. Then we have a question regarding the robotic delivery in Philadelphia. How is that working out? And are the delivery units being vandalized? And what about collisions with pedestrians and vehicles?
Yeah, great question. So the PDD in Philadelphia will be operated by a company called TinyMile or PinkBot. We actually only just recently authorized them, and they're only starting with one robot. They have to go through what's known as phase 1 as part of their permit first. So it's somewhat of a pilot prove it phase where they're going to have to basically collect data and show to us that there are no safety issues, that there haven't been incidents with pedestrians, things like that, in order to move into a phase 2. Phase 2 is where they would really scale up their operations. So as they start to identify restaurant partners in the city, they'll have a lot more of the bots running around the entire city limits. Really is where they're aiming for. So right now, I can't say how much is really happening. It's basically one bot that they're occasionally testing out, but not even doing deliveries yet. And we should see that kind of scale up within the next 6 months or so. So it'll definitely be interesting to follow. If any of you are familiar with the story of HitchBot, it was a hitchhiking robot that sort of went around Canada and parts of the USA, ultimately met its untimely death in the city of Philadelphia. So we know these things can happen. The operator of TinyMile knows these things can happen. They do have some things in place to communicate through the robot, and they also have a team that can then respond to incidents very closely. They're strategically placed or planned to be placed around the city. So we know these things can happen. TinyMile knows they can happen. There's a requirement for insurance. They feel somewhat confident. They have been operating in Miami and some other cities and haven't really had vandalism issues. So I guess we'll see what happens in Philly when things scale up.
All right. Thanks, Derek. Guess you'll have to come back next year and present again. All right, we have a few more, but we're getting to the end here of our webinar. Are there concerns that sending hazard notifications to drivers may be distracting to drivers and that trimming of the notifications are critical? What is the plan to ensure that drivers see and process the notifications prior to navigating the hazard?
Yeah, so the messages are geofenced, so they know where the messages should be displayed, and then the messages have a priority associated with them. So the third party or OEM who receives the message, it's up to them to program the prioritization and properly respond to them. So if they get like two messages at the same time and they're different priority, it might show the one message and then wait a little bit and then show the lower priority message when they're not going to be distracted. There is some work going on in universities and some consulting firms right now to try to work out some of the human factors research that has to go along with this.
Thank you. I think there's one more for you. Is the freight signal prioritization being looked at for any other potential applications, or is it solely for truck use?
Right now, it's just going to be for truck use. We talked to the company who developed it, and they also do transit signal priority, emergency preemption, and a few other things. So once we get to stage 2, there's that possibility to expand that to other applications, and there's other providers who have those applications as well.
Thank you. I know we just got a couple more, and I'm going to go back to a question for Colton quick. What is the plan for rolling out EV infrastructure with the changes in the NEVI program?
Yeah, thanks. So there's not like another state financial source or anything that we would have to support stations in that way. There is, infrastructure deployment that happens all the time, privately funded, in higher demand locations where there may already be a lot of EV registrations nearby. Really, the goal of the NEVI program is just to kind of kickstart the infrastructure network, kind of solve the chicken and egg, charger versus vehicle in lower demand areas like along highways where there may not be much, there may not be a lot of local demand for the chargers, but once you have them, people are able to make the switch to electric. So, yeah, I mean, we're really just laying the groundwork and getting as ready as we can for when we can obligate those funds again and get moving on the program.
Thank you. Is there enough broadband fiber networks in place in rural PA to support PDD?
Yeah, that's interesting. So right now, some of the PDDs operate either autonomously by programming on the PDD itself. So they might have an automated system that's reading off sensors like LiDAR or radar or some of those other things. Other PDDs operate via remote operation, which is actually what TinyMile is doing. I would venture to say in the lack of mobile networks in rural areas, they probably could not do the same operation that they're planning in Philadelphia. That'd be my guess. So it really depends on how they're operating. The one at State College is not operating remotely. It's more of an autonomous robot. So it's kind of the two different use cases you'll see.
All right, thank you. And one last question before I kick it back over to Jacqueline. Are there any security concerns with having all vehicles connected to a centralized system?
I mean, when we talk about connected vehicle data, there's always security concerns. So we make sure that security is baked into the system from the start. And then once we get to the CV2X, we use a security credential management system to ensure that there's like endpoint certification. So security is always going to be built into these systems.
Thanks, Gunnar. And with that, back to you, Jack.
Okay, thank you, Anya. So we've had a lot of great questions today for our panelists. If you still have a question that hasn't been answered, you're always welcome to submit your questions to .innovations@pa.gov, and we can work with our panelists to provide responses to your questions following today's webinar. So I'd like to thank Derek, Gunnar, and Colton, and all of you for participating in today's session. We do have 2 links in the chat box. The first is a quick feedback survey that we'd like you to complete. The second link again is to request 1 professional development hour for participating in today's webinar. Your feedback is very valuable to us so we can plan for future events. So if you could fill that out, we would greatly appreciate it. And I'd also like to remind everyone to look out for the invitation for the next Innovation in Motion webinar, The Road Ahead, Exploring the Highway Safety Traffic Operations Roadmap, which will be held on June 10th at 10 a.m. And also be on the lookout for the Focus on Innovations online publication to be released this month, featuring innovative projects throughout PennDOT. If you have any innovative ideas to share for future webinars, we'd love to hear from you. Please send your ideas to .innovations@pa.gov. And thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to your participation in future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.